Podcasts are pretty common. So what makes the Uncommon podcast uncommon? Well, it's all in our name. I'm your host, Noah Weiss, and we at Uncommon Sports Group understand the unique pressures and temptations that come with a career in the sport industry. We provide uncommon training that helps you successfully navigate common challenges. Hit the follow button on this podcast. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Check out our website and become uncommon. What's going on, USG fam? Welcome back to another episode of the Uncommon Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Noah Weiss, and I'm excited to welcome Coach Mark Potter on to the podcast today. Coach Potter has been coaching the game of basketball for his entire adult life, starting his career as the boys' head coach at Cheney High School before returning to his alma mater, Newman University, where he spent 19 seasons as the men's basketball head coach. During his time at the helm of the Jets, Coach Potter faced a battle with mental health that would forever change his life. Following that battle, Coach Potter founded an organization called D2Up, which seeks to shatter the stigma surrounding mental health issues and to provide hope for recovery to those in the midst of a mental health crisis. Coach Potter, thanks for taking the time to join me today.
It is a pleasure, Noah, and also a pleasure to have the opportunity to get to know you a little bit. So, hopefully, whatever we say today is going to impact your listeners in a positive way, somehow, some way. And that's all we care about at the end of the day. So,
no doubt about it, Coach. No doubt about it. Thanks for being here. And Coach, I think it'd be great to start talking about your career in coaching. Obviously, this is a sports podcast, and you spent a lot of your adult life coaching the game of basketball. So to share with us, why did you decide to pursue a career in coaching the game of basketball, and what impact did that have in your spiritual and personal life?
So I grew up in small town Kansas, and I had a coach that coached all three sports, and being a competitor in all three of those sports, which was football, basketball, and baseball. And also, with the same exact head coach, it was just like, his, what he did every day, I thought, that's something I want to do. I want to be able to be in the sports world and impact young people, in a positive way and still be able to compete at the highest level. And Coach Les Davis, and who's now passed away, was a legend in Kansas. And so that was one of the, he was a great influence on why I decided to become a coach. And, when I went to college, I played two sports. So I played basketball and baseball for 4 years at college. And, again, just, I think, every one of us has like this different competitive spirit and, depending on what it might be. Well, in the sports world, for me, it was like, God gave me this, high energy, always thinking about what, to do to be better. And, not just in personal life, but also obviously in what I did for a living. So, I wanted to be a professional baseball player, and I was a better baseball player than I was basketball, although both of them, basketball pretty much paid my college education.
Yeah.
And then when getting out of, college, it was time to go get a job. I didn't get drafted, which I thought I was going to. It was really close.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen. That wasn't God's will. So, went to Cheney High School in Cheney, Kansas, which is a 3A here. And that's where I started. I somehow, some way, after, this is how God works. Okay. So my wife and I, we interviewed at, Western Kansas schools. We were offered the job. We could have gone back to our hometown, which is in Southeast Kansas. And then out of nowhere, I get a phone call from, I had put my application in for Cheney, but, we lived in Wichita, so it was only 30 minutes from Wichita.
Yeah.
And I was in the third wave of interviews. So, not knowing all that happened, and we're not going to get into all that, but they offered it to a guy, didn't take it. They did a second wave and offered it to a different guy. He didn't take it, got another job and didn't like the other people or whatever. I'm in the third weight. I'm 20, when I interviewed, I was 22. And probably, listen, that's probably not the right word. There's not a 22-year-old that is fully ready to be a head coach. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
You get thrown into the fire and, you may think you are at 22, but believe me, there's so many things to learn. But God, give me the opportunity, and next thing you know, I'm a head coach at Cheney High School. Went 5 years there, 5 years at Cape and Mount Carmel, which is a level up, 2 levels up actually in Kansas, and then 1 year at Wichita South High School. So I was a head coach at 11 years at the high school level, and then had the opportunity to start restart the men's basketball program at Newman University. So we started it from scratch. That was also another incredible challenge. And,
no doubt.
if somebody asked me to do that today, I would not do that. But when you're 32 years old or whatever it was, 32 or 3, you don't know any better. You just think, you got the world by the tail, and you get in there and you start recruiting players. I mean, I got the job in March, and I had to field a team. I had to have a team on the court, by when August started, when school started in August. So, believe me, there were a lot of hours being put in to get that program restarted. And, God just, blessed me and that program tremendously. So that's kind of the quick background, I guess, of why I got into coaching and kind of what happened that led me to where I was at Newman University for those 19 years.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Coach. I think it's good for our listeners just to get to know more about your journey through sports. I mean, this industry is so powerful, but it is so challenging. And so I appreciate you sharing on both the positives of your coaching journey, but also some of those struggles as well. And Coach, as we dive in to our main point here today, really excited to chat through just your journey with mental health and what you're doing now at D2 Up. But I want to start, I mentioned in the introduction that you faced a battle with mental health during the latter part of your coaching career at Newman. Just share with us kind of the beginning of that mental health journey and some of the signs and symptoms you began to experience during that mental health crisis in your life.
So I was in my 18th year as a head coach, and I think I had been at Newman, I want to say for 6 years there. And, it was at the beginning of that basketball season. Literally, I always describe it as day one of practice that particular year, which was in 2005, the 05-06 season, was when I felt the first symptom. And I really didn't know what that symptom was actually going to lead to severe depression. And I also did not know that I had struggled with really high anxiety really for my entire coaching career. Just didn't know what it was. I just thought that's the way you were supposed to feel. And so the anxiety kind of went to another level. And then I remember the very first day of practice that year, I walked on the court, and, I felt like, my goodness, I just don't feel quite as confident as I normally did. And confident meaning, you've been doing it for 18 years. It wasn't like I hadn't, gone through a lot of things to get to that point. I'd been at Newman for a long time. So, when people ask, like, what made that happen, my doctor couldn't even, give a description other than, when this is something that I hope somebody will hear what I'm getting ready to say, whether they're in the business world or whatever world they're working in. I basically thought, if I outwork my opponent, and we use that phrase all the time, right? In the sports world, in the business world, I'm going to outwork my opponent. Well, I sure enough did that, because I averaged about 4 hours of sleep a night during the basketball season every year up until that point. So when people ask, well, how did it happen? Why'd you start having symptoms? My doctor said, probably, when you do that 17 straight years, and now all of a sudden you're 41, I think is what it was when that particular year. That leads into, your body and your brain chemistry changing, because you're just not taking care of yourself the way you need to. Thank goodness I wasn't a drinker or anything like that, or it would have really gotten bad. But so I mean, I just, I worked hard and didn't probably work smart, if that makes sense. And it's there's such a fine line, to get to be successful. Well, that day one, when I didn't feel near as confident, I thought, I hope these guys don't, don't screw up anything today. They don't do anything stupid, so I don't have to get on them. Well, that's the opposite of the way I always thought. I mean,
Yeah.
as a head coach, you embrace those things.
Yeah.
As a boss, you embrace those things. You don't always enjoy them,
Yeah.
but you embrace them because that's what you do.
Mm.
And that's not the way I felt. I was just like, man, I don't know if I feel like I'm capable of handling all the issues and motivating these players like I had done for 17 years. That was the day one.
Yeah.
And then it kind of, every day, like it seemed like something different would happen. It took me approximately 5.5, almost 6 weeks to go from what I would call my normal to spiraling completely out of control with my thoughts, all the way to the point where I had suicidal thoughts. And, so I'm going to stop right there because maybe you'll have another question in the midst of that, but I can keep going with my story forever. You know that. You've heard me speak before. So, but that's how it started. And then obviously a lot of things happen in those next 5.5 weeks.
Coach, I appreciate you sharing. I think the importance of that early stage is for listeners to recognize if maybe they are experiencing those symptoms. And I appreciate you sharing too, even just the confusion you had, right? So our listeners aren't feeling like, man, I don't get it. You also felt that way and we're struggling to identify what was happening. And Coach, I guess the question I have next is, what made it so difficult in the beginning for you to begin to kind of recognize that those signs weren't normal and to get help? And how would you maybe advise individuals that have those signs and symptoms to get help? Like, what are ways they can actively go and seek help when they're feeling these symptoms?
Well, the first thing I would say is when you have some symptoms that are not normal for you, then don't wait for 20 other symptoms to take place like I did. And get to the point where I did start having the suicidal thoughts. Had I known what it was, and here's the other side of this, like the stigma is so strong that you can even know that you are severely depressed with incredibly high anxiety and still not go get help. I mean, my wife and I, we speak around the nation. Yesterday we were in, we just got back from Pennsylvania, and that was our 25th state to be able to speak on this topic to different colleges, student athletes, coaches, high schools, middle schools. And I always tell them that whatever you do, when you start to feel a symptom or symptoms, do not wait. Please tell somebody that you're struggling. Many times the person that's going through the issues with mental health, they're battling more than just the symptoms. They're also battling the stigma that's telling them, hey, I can't tell anybody. I mean, my example is, hey, I'm a head coach, right? I'm a man. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm supposed to be in control. And, that's just, that stigma is so strong that it says, you got to hide this. This is the way I was brought up. And many people that listen to this will probably be able to relate to this. Here's what we do. We suck it up, suck it up, pull up your bootstraps and go forward. Boom, done. We're not talking about this. Like, you're okay. You'll get through this and everything will be fine. And that's, people say that not because they're trying to hurt you. My mom and dad would say that. They love me dearly, right?
Yeah.
It's because they want you to feel better. And if they feel like if they can just like, okay, you know what, you're fine. And they give you a little bit of encouragement, you'll get through it. Well, that's not the way mental health issues, when you have mental health issues, that's just not the way it works. Because the chemical imbalance in the brain, it's a serotonin level that starts to drop. And when it starts to drop, my greatest wisdom that I could give anybody is do not wait for 10 symptoms to hit. If you feel the first symptom, something's not quite right, just go to your doctor. And here's what most people don't get, Noah. They don't understand that every family in America has somebody that is affected by a mental health issue at some point in time or another. You see, when I started this journey, 17 years ago when it happened to me, I guess it was 18 now. So at the beginning of that season, when it started, I literally thought I knew I was the only head coach that couldn't handle his daily duties, that had those type of thoughts, right? I knew that, right?
Yeah.
You know what I've learned since? I've learned that there are so many people out there, many head coaches, many assistant coaches, many people that aren't in the coaching or sports world that are struggling with mental health issues that continue to hide it because they think they're the only ones.
Yeah.
You know, my wife always says I love this phrase, and it's so simple, yet it's something that everybody needs to hear, that the only wrong thing you can do is to do nothing. And as those symptoms were starting for me, I was doing nothing other than getting worse with the symptoms, not telling my own wife, who I had been married to at that time for 21 years and known over 30. Yeah. And here's what I want to tell people. So when we speak, my wife speaks with me. And so, we always have a little fun with this part because it's kind of a heavy topic, right?
Yeah.
But I always tell people, I started calling my wife when I was a 7th grader and she was an 8th grader. And people just like, what? Are you kidding me? And, I always tell them, I was just going after an older woman, you know what I mean, right? They have fun. I just have fun with that. And,
yeah.
But I tell that story because, we've now been married for 39 years. And so at the time I was going through severe depression, 21 years being married, known her over 30. And the stigma still told me, don't tell your wife, she might think you're weak. So, the one person on the face of the earth, you're newly married, right? Like,
yeah.
You're saying, well, what if that happened to me in the next month or two? Would you tell your wife? Would you discuss it with your wife? Well, you better know, or I'm coming to Minnesota. All right, you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Because that's the stigma that's talking, and that stigma is a lie. And one of the things that I always tell people is like, how's that been working for us? When you look around the country and you see the suicide rate as high as it is now, and now it's below 11 minutes. So it's every 10 minutes and some seconds, somebody dies by suicide in the United States. Man. That's a discouraging statistic, but my wife and we are on this journey so that we can start to attack that part of, let people know, listen, it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
What's not okay is not to do something about it.
Amen.
So, I don't know. I probably got off of where we were going there, but there's so many things that people start to think when they start to struggle like this, and I just want them to know they're not alone in their journey. And when you think you are, what I've learned these last 17 years is that, my goodness, if I'd have just said, honey, I'm struggling a little bit. I don't know what it is, don't know what's happening here, but we probably need to go to the doctor. That is not what I did. I hid it from my wife until my wife, she did start seeing some signs at I'm guessing here about the 4-week mark. So day 1, symptom, day 2, some other, just start having some thoughts like, okay, what is going on here? Anxiety level raises. Started to become emotional. So I would, after a practice, I would go to my office, close my door and just cry. And, 41-year-old head coach of 18 years, that husband, that man, that father, all those things, right? Like, depression and anxiety and any type of mental health issue, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care if you're a head coach.
Amen.
It doesn't care, where you come from, whether you're from Minnesota or Kansas or wherever. It's going to, in many cases, and I think when we start to understand this as a society, that when we recognize that it's at some point it might even affect me. So when I say that, like, I hope everybody that's listening to this podcast will say at some point it might even affect me.
Yeah. That's
either personally or someone in their family. And to be, quite frank with everybody, like, if they're honest, it's probably already affected them.
Yeah.
Someone in their family or them. And once we get to that point as a society, then we can actually start attacking the issue.
Sure.
It's like you're having a heart attack. We're going to get you to the doctor and do everything in our power to save your life. If you're a diabetic, you're going to take your insulin every day. If you get the flu, or if it's COVID or whatever, you're going to get the doctor and you're going to work on that and you're going to try to fix it, right? Well, we're talking about a mental health issue that the stigma has been attached since the beginning of time. And we say, every 10 minutes somebody dies. A little over 10 minutes, but it's less than 11 in the United States. Man, let's start changing our thought process, right?
Yeah.
And that's why my wife and I do what we do. So,
Yeah.
and it, I can get into this a little bit too, but there was a point in time in which my wife said, "What is going on with you?" Because she saw a tear running down my face, and that was about that 4-week mark. And I'm still trying to keep my head above water. I'm going to practice every day, trying to get my team ready for the season, but I was spiraling, and I was hoping that nobody found out. I was hoping my team didn't find out. My assistant coaches didn't find out. The stigma is so strong that you just do everything in your power to keep going, to put on that face.
Yeah.
Anybody listening to this will know what I mean by that if they've ever gone through any type of struggle at all. We put on that face and we go out in public, and and I get it. Sometimes you have to do that. That's we don't always feel great every day, but when you're going through a mental health issue, man, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. And what I thought was embarrassing, I felt guilty, all those things. Now I know, 17 years later, now I know, it's like, wow, I just wish people would understand that, because, I'm like, they're like me. If they're not telling anybody, they're like I am. And that's not the right way to go about it. So my wife she changed my world in a hurry. Like, she saw that, she started asking a lot of questions, and I'm like, and I still just told her, nope, I don't know what's going on. I'm just a little more anxious than normal. So I still didn't tell her the actual, thoughts and things that I was going through. And then finally, we were at about the 5-week mark approximately. We were at the Saturday before the opening game of the season, and I mean, she'd seen me 2 different times, maybe 3, with tear running down my face in the house, and she's like, "What is happening with you?" She was getting frustrated with me and starting to ask a lot of questions. And now I'm like, "Oh no, now my wife knows, right?" Like, now my wife's starting to catch on. And it was a Saturday morning, and every year I would bring my team from Newman University, which is in Wichita, Kansas, out to the small community that we live in, which is 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And we would always practice at the local high school. And then we would go to the bowling alley and there's a pizza place that's connected to it. And we would kind of have a team bonding activity the Saturday before the opening game of the season. We did it every year.
Yeah.
Well, this was the day. I'm standing at my sink at 9:30 in the morning. My team's coming out. We're starting practice at 10 a.m., at the local high school. And I'm losing it. Just at my sink, just, crying and just emotional. And my wife comes around. She's like, "What is going on with you?" Just could not understand what was happening. And to be real honest, I didn't understand it, but I knew that I was really, really sick. And I knew that something needed to give, but I just didn't know how to tell her. And I think a lot of listeners might be able to relate to that comment as well. Like, that pride, our egos, all of those things, we try to protect it, and we do everything in our power to protect it. And most of the time it's just not a good thing to try to do that. It's just, in this case, my wife, she says, "Well, you need me to take you to practice today?" Well, she'd never asked that question before. And I'd been a head coach for a long time. And so one more time, I, wiped it up. I'm like, "No, I don't need you to take me to practice." And I went to practice. I faked my team out another 2 hours. I faked my assistant coaches out for another 2 hours. And that's what we do. People with mental health issues, we fake people out. We're just really trained well at that, to put on that face and go out in the public and just, try to do our thing. And then you go home and it's just like the most miserable thing ever, because you're not addressing it, and you until you start to address it, you will just continue to plummet.
Yeah.
That's my experience. Like, you probably should address it, but so many times people get to that point and they can't help themselves. They can't make the decision to help themselves. That was me.
Yeah.
And so if somebody else doesn't step in, that's, I think, where we have a lot of our issues with suicide, because it gets to the point where it's like, man, I'm so hopeless, so helpless. I have this cloud over my head. What am I going to do? I can't tell my wife. Well, yeah, you can tell your wife. You need to tell your wife. You need to tell someone that you're struggling, and it's okay to do that, And I always say, there's strength in getting help. It's not a weakness.
Yeah.
And in any other phase of our life, most people would agree with that statement. In any other phase, whether it be something physically that we're getting help with, whether it's somebody that's training you for your job, I mean, you're getting help. right? We get help all over the place. We learn, we get better.
Yeah.
Well, mental health is the same exact thing. And the sooner we start to recognize that, the better off we're all going to be. So I'll finish the story quickly.
Yeah.
That day we went, we finished practice and we went to the bowling alley and we ordered pizzas for the guys. And what I haven't said is I lost 30 pounds in that 5.5 week period.
Wow.
So the way when my serotonin level started to drop and I started having a lot of, strange thoughts and just spiraled out of control, what also affected me physically because, when I could put my favorite food in my mouth, which was pizza, and it would still make me nauseated. And so that's a chemical imbalance in the brain. That's what that is.
Yeah.
And so I just chose not to eat. I ate just enough to have enough energy to, to do what I needed to do to survive.
Yeah.
But losing 30 pounds in 5.5 weeks and, that's so unhealthy. And then you add upon that the mental health issues that I was having. And I was at an all-time low. And so that day, I lied to my team. I said, hey guys, I have a lower back issue. I normally bowl with them. We all bowl together and we have fun. And it's a day that we get a chance to see each other in a different light. Well, this day I just lied to them. I said, guys, I have a lower back issue. I need to go home. And so I did. I went home and I laid down in my chair and, my wife knew, obviously her antenna was way up at this point.
Totally.
And so she was keeping a very close eye on me and I was just laying in my chair and I just was just like, I don't know what to do. I'm hopeless and I'm helpless. And I have all these thoughts that I thought I could suck it up and get through myself.
Yeah.
And it's not going away. It's only getting worse. And my wife sees me struggling. And that particular night, I had to go to do what's called a live scout. Back in those days, we did a lot of live scouts. Okay. So I had an hour and 10-minute drive to go to Sterling College, who we were going to play the next week. And I was like, I don't want to go out of my house. I don't want to talk to anybody. Somebody might find out I'm not doing well. Which is another, sign.
Yeah.
Is that and you know me now well enough to know, hey, I'm a people person. We'll talk all day if you want to, Noah. And matter of fact, some people are like, okay, shut up, coach. It's time. Let's go. But that's who I am. And I love people and I love talking to people. When I was going through severe depression, I was the opposite. I was avoiding people. And that's the way I was that afternoon. I was like, I don't even know if I can go up there. And my wife comes in and she's like, you got to tell me what's going on. Like I can't help you if you can't talk to me. And this is not good. And all of those things. She's like, so she finally said, do you need me to take you up to Sterling College? And so was my way of reaching out to my wife. I said, I think I need you to take me up there. That was my way of saying, yeah, I'm struggling. I need some help here, right?
Yeah.
Just drive me up there. Well, that was the trip. And that was the day that my wife went from being in denial that something major was going on with me to no longer being in denial. And we got up there and, my wife always talks about this when she speaks, but she says I cried all the way up there. And honestly, I don't remember that, but like I was so sick, I was just like emotional all the time,
Yeah.
But you know what I did before we got there, right? I cleaned it up and, we walked into that facility and I'm like, I want to go up there to the highest part, scout the team and get the heck out of there and not talk to anybody. We walked in and my wife sees somebody that she knows. She's like, Mark, come over here. I want to introduce you. So she introduced me to this man that she knew that one of her colleagues at school was her dad. And my wife's a teacher, was a 32-year teacher.
Wow.
And she said, she introduced me to him. And in that conversation, I said absolutely nothing to the man. I guess I shook his hand and he's like, hey, coach, I've been watching your teams, what a year last year. And, how's your team going to be this year? And I just stood there, didn't say a word. And my wife was answering for me. And so as we walked away from that conversation, that was the moment in time where my life was saved because my wife said, okay, no more. That's embarrassing. How come you can't talk to somebody? What is happening here? Okay, enough is enough. So she went and got a doctor's appointment. She came to me on Monday and she said, we're going to the doctor. We're going to go 1 o'clock today, but we're going to attack this problem. We're going to get this problem fixed. We're going to find out what in the heck's going on with you.
Yeah. Wow.
And after all the struggles that I just described to you, I looked at my wife and I said, I'm not going to the doctor, and you can't make me go to the doctor. Needless to say, that didn't go too well.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
wife, she was very aggressive in saying, "Oh, you're going to the doctor." She said, "If I have to call your assistant coach up, who's 6'6", weighed 280 pounds, and he has to come over here and pick you up and put you in the car, you're going to the doctor. You can either walk, or I'll call him and he'll pick you up and carry you and shove you in the car.
Hmm.
So which one's it going to be?"
Yeah.
And I'm going to stop right there in the story. Obviously, I agreed with her to walk to the car. Okay,
Yeah.
so, but I want to stop right there in the story, and I
Hmm.
want anybody that's listening to this story
Hmm.
to ask themselves this question: Are they the person that's my wife? Are they the one that's watching somebody that's struggling, not knowing what to do, not knowing how to handle it,
Hmm.
knowing they need to get them help and do something about it,
Yeah.
but afraid of what might happen if they do? And
Hmm.
that's so many people are in that position. It could be a best friend in high school or middle school, or it could be our best friends, at our ages now. It could be a colleague. It could be somebody we're coaching. It could be one of your colleagues, right? It could be
Hmm.
anybody.
Yeah.
And you may be the only one that actually knows what's going on with that person.
Yeah.
Could be the only one on the face of
Hmm.
the earth that actually knows what's going on, right?
Yeah.
And so there's this fine line between us loving on and being friends with people that may actually open up a little bit to us,
Yeah.
or may not actually open up at all, but we see all the signs and symptoms,
Without a
right?
doubt.
So then there's a choice to be made.
Hmm.
And so that's why I stopped at that point in the story, because it's the most important part of the
Yeah.
story.
Without a
And that
doubt.
is, wife did not take no for an answer.
Hmm. Without
My
a
wife
doubt.
always says when she speaks, she says, because she was, when she told me, you're getting up out of that chair, right? She was after me, right? She was very aggressive in saying that, and she
Hmm.
always like almost apologizes when she's telling that part of the story. She said, "I'm not saying you should yell at your husband or your spouse if you're trying to get him to the doctor."
Yeah.
And here's what I would say to that. I don't know if that's what you should do either, but I know this: had my wife not, got after me and forced the issue, I might not be here talking to you today.
Hmm. Yeah.
So how you do it,
Yeah.
and to me it's almost irrelevant. Like,
Hmm.
get them in the car and
Yeah.
get them help if they're at that point.
Hmm.
If we always tell, when I'm speaking to student athletes and coaches at the college or high school level, or really anybody at the high school level, but especially in the athletic world, in the sports
Hmm.
world, I always tell, listen, rally. What do we do as coaches?
Hmm.
We get our players to rally around their team,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
what we get them to do. That's our job, is to get a cohesive group, and when things start to go awry a little bit, we gotta rally around each other, right?
Yeah.
Well, man, we have to start rallying around our teammates in regards to mental health. We can no longer be afraid to help somebody.
Yeah.
We can no longer be afraid of how they might react or respond when we say, you know what, you're drinking way too much, or you're going out and doing stuff that I've never seen you do, or you're missing class, or
Hmm.
there's a whole long list, or you're missing work every Monday.
Yeah.
Why aren't you at work? Or maybe it's another day of the week. But
Yeah.
again, those are all signs and symptoms of somebody that's really struggling with something.
Hmm.
And we as a society, and we don't mean to do this. This is why we're doing what we do today. Like,
Yeah.
I'm telling them, listen, you have permission to get after them and say, listen,
Hmm.
no, we're going to go get help, and
Yeah.
it's okay,
Yeah.
because there's so many people out there. I promise you're not alone in this struggle,
Hmm.
and you won't be alone in this struggle, because I'll walk the walk with you.
Yeah. Coach, it's great that you shared, and I love that you touched on the stigma. And I think that's, for our listeners, I mean, young individuals working in this industry, life is busy. And oftentimes, I think you probably felt this, that you can't stop when you work in sports because there's so much to do,
Right.
and there's so much expectations of how you should perform, and the success of the organization or the team. And so I'm glad that you shared that. And I'm really glad that you shared your story, because it's relatable for many. And that's why I love what you do, is speaking, being real, and encouraging people to be honest about their struggles. So, Coach, I did want to transition. I love this next part of your story. And as you sort of came to realize that, there was this mental health struggle, you decided to step away from your team, and you decided not to share initially with
Yeah.
the team
Yeah.
and with the public, right? Which is a decision that many would probably agree with, right? It's keep it too close to the chest. But at some point, you did decide to share it. And there's a really cool part of that story where one of your players, a freshman, actually was the encourager behind that. So I'd love for you to share more about that story and what led you to eventually be open about your struggles.
Yeah, it's weird when you even say that. It gives me chills and it makes me
Hmm.
emotional.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
there's so many parts of the story that is life changing for the better, and obviously this is one of them.
Yeah.
But I want to clarify one thing. I didn't make the decision to step away from my team. My doctor made the decision for me
Hmm.
to step away from my team,
Yeah.
and the, I agreed 100%. And what matter of fact, I was relieved, which
Yeah.
most people don't understand that because I was a head coach for well over 800 games.
Wow.
I played 3 sports in high school, 2 sports in college, and coached well over 800 games and only missed 8 games ever. And
Hmm.
these are the 8 that I missed,
Yeah.
that I had to stay home the first 8 games of that season. So I was relieved because I knew I was really sick and I knew I needed help. And
Hmm.
he gave me permission
Yeah.
to get help, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So I think that's also, before I tell this final story here, or part of the final story, I think that's also another really important part for people to hear is
Yeah.
that, man, you may be the one person that can give somebody else permission and let them know, listen, it is okay.
Yeah.
And I just think that's a really part. So after I got better, so I was home for 5.5, almost 6 weeks. I missed the first 8 games.
Hmm.
So it was the day before the opening game of the season is when my wife took me to the doctor. That's the day my doctor said, you're going to stay home until I tell you can go back to your team.
Hmm.
And so I started taking medication, antidepressants. He said it's going to take 4 to 6 weeks before it fully kicks in. He was correct. He said you may get worse before you get better. He was correct in that. And it took about 3 weeks of being home before I actually did anything. I didn't turn on the
Hmm.
television. I didn't read a paper. I was so far gone that I was just, I just didn't do anything except sleep, take my medication, tried to get better.
Hmm.
And then doctor released me to go back to my team after about 5.5 weeks. So the medication kicked in. Uh, my serotonin level went back up, at least
Hmm.
close to normal. I mean, it wasn't like I felt 100%, but I was ready
Yeah.
to go back and coach my team again, and he
Yeah.
knew I could. Um, and so I went back and I got on the floor for that first practice, and I walked in time for the practice. And one of my players at the other end of the floor, he was at the other end of the court shooting around, getting ready for practice. He saw me. And keep in mind, my players didn't even know. Matter of fact,
Yeah.
I told my wife, don't tell anybody why I'm not coaching my team.
Hmm.
So the only people that actually knew were my 2 assistant coaches, my athletic director, and my personal family.
Yeah.
We weren't going to tell anybody. I
Hmm.
mean, that was just the way it was going to be.
Yeah.
Stigma is strong.
No doubt.
And so I walk in that practice and that player like turns around and sees me. Like he didn't know. Like they all, little did I know, like they're like, what is going on with coach? Like,
Hmm.
does he have cancer? Does he have, like, they had all these things going through their mind, which, in retrospect, had I known all of that, I, would have told them because
Yeah.
I don't want them to suffer too, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but you're not even in a position to make that decision, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
he runs down to me, big hug, and we have emotional moment right there. He's like, "Man, great to see you, coach." And
Hmm.
I thought, you know, he was excited. I was excited to be back, and I thought, maybe I do owe it to my team to let them know why I was with them. So before that
Hmm.
practice, I took him in the locker room. I told him everything I just told you,
Yeah.
basically. And before we walked out, I said, "Okay, guys, we're going to keep it in house. Okay, we're not walking out there. Don't tell your girlfriends. Don't tell your moms and dads. Sure as heck, don't talk to the media.
Hmm.
All right, let's practice." And that was the
Yeah.
last time I was ever going to talk about it.
Yeah.
2 days later, we get on the vans to head 2 hours up the turnpike to play my first game back, which would have been our 9th game of the season. I have a policy that a freshman has to sit up front with the coach. So I'm driving in one van, one of my assistants is driving the other van.
Hmm.
And this freshman from Phoenix, Arizona, by the name of Dan, gets in and like, "What's up, coach?" And he was
Yeah.
actually, I think, happy to be up there. I always jokingly say, yeah, the freshmen hated that rule, but we did it to try to get to know him a little bit better and just in a little, just have regular conversation.
Yeah.
And that kind of forces the issue a little bit. So
Totally.
he gets up there and he starts talking, and we're just telling stories, about life and just having fun. I'm back, and I'm like, man, there's some normality to my life again,
Yeah.
and man, things. I was really feeling good, and it was about an hour into that drive to that game, and I was telling him a story, and like he just interrupts me right in the middle of the sentence, like he's like, coach, he kind of stuttered a little bit, and I'm like, What, Dan? He's like, well, in the locker room when you told us why you weren't with us, in the locker room when you told us, not to talk to our girlfriends or our moms and dads, and sure as heck don't talk to the media. I'm like, yeah, I remember, Dan. I was thinking, man, where's he going with this, right?
Yeah.
And he kind of stuttered a little bit. It took him an hour to build up this courage, right? And
Yeah.
he, freshman in college, tells his head coach, he says it kind of like this, like, he said, Coach, he said, I think it'd be really cool if you would talk to the media.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That gives me chills when I say that, right? Like, God works in so many different ways, that we have no idea.
Yeah. No doubt.
And it shocked me, when he said, I didn't even ask him why he said it. It just shocked me. It kind of took me and I remember we drove up to that game, we played that game, and I got back home and about 3 a.m. And I never wake up my wife, and I woke her up that night at 3 a.m. and I said, honey, I said, this is what my freshman said. This is what Dan said in the van on the way up there. It was bothering me.
Yeah.
And, so we got down on our knees and we just prayed about it, and we did not make the decision that night. But a couple of days later, 2 or 3 days later, we made the decision that freshman was right. So what I forgot to tell you in the midst of the story, so when I was at home, I had received an email from our sports writer that covers our team. So I was still at home getting better. And that sports writer had just said, hey, Coach, I'd like to be the first one that talks to you about why you have not been with your team when you get back with your team. And I replied, and I said, I'm not talking to you or anybody else. And I sent it, right? So that was a part of the story I forgot to tell. Well, now I call that guy back up, right?
Yeah.
I actually call him up. He emailed me, but I call him up and I said, hey, his name's Jeffrey Parsons. I said, Jeffrey, you let me know. I'll tell you everything. So he came in, did an article, and we estimate over 400 people contacted us in the next 48 hours, over half of which we didn't even know who they were. And then about a week and a half after that, give or take, I'm looking for it right up there. I'd have to go out of the picture, but so I got a letter from a 17-year-old high school senior that's just up the road from Newman University. And that letter said, Coach Potter, you don't know me, but I read the article in the paper. And he said, I knew that I had a lot of the same symptoms that you had. And after one really difficult night, I finally told my mom and dad of my struggles.
Wow.
And then he said, I wrote the letter to tell you, Coach, thanks for saving my life. And that's the one that, between my freshman and that letter.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of other letters saying a lot of different things, but that one was the one that just jumped out at me. And I'm just like, man, I had no idea. I just did not understand. When I'm at the lowest of my lows and on my knees saying, God, why me? That's why. So that's why.
Yeah.
And so that letter sits right there. So I coached for another 11 years after all this happened, right?
Yeah.
And that letter sat right on my desk so I could see it every day. And it would remind me that I'm not just a head basketball coach coaching basketball. I have a lot of other things that I can do to impact people in a real positive way through what I went through.
Without a doubt.
And I truly felt that was a calling for me. So, I felt God, obviously worked through the freshman, worked through the letter from a high school senior. And, so my wife and I have been carrying that torch really for going on 18 years now.
Yeah.
And after 11 years of being a head coach, I went home one day and I just said, honey, I said, I think I really feel called to get out and start speaking about this topic and trying to impact the world in a much different way than we are.
Yeah.
And my wife says, and she can say this a lot better than I can, but she says, you know what? God may be talking to you about this, but God is not talking to me. I don't think that's what we should do. And needless to say, she reluctantly in the beginning, because, the worries are, can we even make a living? I mean, she retired from teaching, but I didn't retire from coaching. I had to make a living.
Yeah.
So from a selfish standpoint, not really selfish. I mean, I'm going to do what God asked me to do here. And I'm going to say, you know what, Lord, please take care of us financially too, because because we are taking a chance here.
No doubt.
And man, the first year was some challenges, and COVID obviously was some challenges, which was for everybody.
Yeah.
But we have been blessed way beyond what we deserve in regards to being able to impact so many people. As I said, we've been in 25 states. We have not been in Minnesota, by the way.
You gotta get up here, Coach.
That would be number 26.
You gotta get up here, Coach.
Are you with me, Noah?
I'm with you there, no doubt.
And anyway, we it's been a blessing, and through all those struggles, I'll give you one example. So where I was at yesterday, and this happens everywhere, almost everywhere we go, and I will not tell you, it was an athletic administrator at the college level. And I always ask people, when I talked earlier about my wife going from being in denial to no longer being in denial, I always ask in my presentation, are you in denial? About yourself or about somebody whether it's a family member or whatever. And I challenge them that if you are in denial, that today's the day that I will pray and I will hope that you will no longer be in denial.
Amen.
I had a administrator come to me after yesterday's presentation, tears running down her face. She said, Coach, I'm going to go get some help. I've been in denial. No longer am I going to be in denial.
Man, that's awesome.
So that's why we do what we do, and I have 1,000 other stories I could tell you, but we don't have time today, obviously. So there's the Coach Potter, as fast a version as I can possibly give and still give the entire story.
Coach, thanks for sharing. I love the last part and getting that out into the public eye. I think, to your point, the stigma is so powerful, and it can make us feel like if we tell somebody we're going to be weak and we're going to be seen as kind of like almost like an alien, like an odd individual. And I just love that there is so much impact from you sharing it for your players, I'm sure, and for that young man that sent you the letter. It just really is an encouragement. And I love that you're doing this for a living now. You're sharing your story. You're having an impact. And with that said, I'd love for you to share with our listeners, what is D2 Up? What is the vision? And how do you guys really impact individuals with your story?
So D2 Up, and it stands for, get ready for this, Noah. Dedicated to uncommon. You can relate to that, right?
Sure can.
Principles.
Sure
so
can.
Dedicated to uncommon principles. That was one word that I wanted in it, in our business name. My wife did everything else, I promise you, because I'm not good with any of that stuff. So we have a website that is d2up.org. So it's the letter D, the number 2, so d2up.org. And all of our information is on there. My bio is on there, my cell phone. Anyway, we have our email on there. They can email us. And so what we do and how we get jobs is when we speak, if those people feel like it's worthy for anybody else to hear, we just simply ask them, listen, can you get the word out? Because we want to go to everywhere. We don't care if it's a 1A school in Minnesota. We don't care if it's the largest business in Minnesota. And we don't care if it's a college, D1, NAI. We don't care. We don't care where we go. We just want to impact.
No doubt.
We have no, we know that God's going to, hopefully plant the seed into the right people's minds that, you know what, maybe we need to bring them out here to Minnesota. Hopefully, we're going to pray that happens,
No doubt.
So
it's awesome, Coach. Thanks for sharing. It really is an awesome ministry that you guys have, and encouraging to know that you're making your way through the country, right? Half the states, you said 25. That's halfway to all of them. So that's really an encouragement, Coach. And I think last question I have for you, Coach, and really just, there's so much that goes into recovery, right? You mentioned the importance of getting to the doctor, the importance of antidepressants and being on that medication, the importance of telling your loved ones, taking time away from work. But I think something that is very important as well is our faith in Christ and that role that he plays in our trial. So just share with me, what role did your personal relationship with Jesus play in your battle with mental health?
Well, I became a Christian when I was 8 years old. It's a little small church in Chautauqua, Kansas, down by where my wife and I grew up, and been in church all my life. And, my faith, as I think anybody would say, I mean, as Christians, sometimes I'm like, man, my faith is incredible. And then sometimes it's like, gosh, I am just not even remotely close to where I need to be, right? Like I need to
No
get
doubt.
back to doing what I do. So always, so when I start struggling today, way before that,
Yeah.
I just do a lot of praying.
Yeah.
And, I ask God to lead me and to help me to think the way I need to think. And I truly think, there's this spiritual battle that's going on with Satan out there trying to destroy us
Yeah.
Christians and
Yeah.
not wanting us to get a message like this out and not wanting us to talk about how, God had this game plan. And, if we'll follow, like if
Yeah.
we do what we're supposed to do,
Yeah.
right? Hard to do sometimes.
No
But if we'll
doubt.
do that, like, wow, like you can't script, what's happened in my life
Yeah.
and nor would I want to. Like if you'd have told me I was doing this, I'd have laughed at you,
Yeah.
prior to going through all of that. That's God's doing, not mine.
Amen.
So God had,
Amen.
my relationship with Jesus had a whole lot to do with what we do.
Yeah.
And it had a whole lot to do with how I coached, and that doesn't mean I was perfect, because I sure as heck wasn't. But I always, my faith always it held me together.
Yeah.
It kept, even in the depths of depression, and people will say, well, how does, God allow that to happen? Well, you know what? God had a game plan.
Yeah.
If I just follow the game plan, good things might happen, especially God's game plan.
Yeah.
So, it's not my game plan that's always the right.
Yeah.
So I hope people will hear that too. It's like, man, we as humans, we just think sometimes we can just do it on our own. And man, that's just, that's the next to, it's impossible. It's not it's impossible to do that. So I hope that answers your question. My wife and I, we love Jesus, and we are absolutely blessed to be able to even say that in the country that we live in, and all the things that go with, all the struggles that people have. I mean, without that, it doesn't matter. People look at you and say, oh, head college basketball coach and did it. I have just as many problems as they do. Doesn't matter how much money you have. Doesn't matter if you're poor. Doesn't matter where we come from. I promise you, we do. So without my relationship with Jesus, I don't know how to make it, to be real honest with you.
Yeah, Coach, I love that. I love that testimony you just shared too, and the importance of your role, or rather that Christ's role that he played in your life allowed you to stay afloat through a lot of your challenges. I think about Matthew 7. It's one of my favorite teachings from Jesus, is the house that was built on the rock and the house built on the sand. And when the trials of life and the storms of life come, the house on the rock stands firm, but the house in the sand is crushed and destroyed. And so I think as believers, we can remind ourselves that when these trials do come, we do have a solid foundation we can stand on. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and I hope if there's a non-believer out there that's not a Christian that hears this podcast today, that the one thing that I always think about is, when we speak about our Christian background and our faith and all of those things, sometimes we can come across as, I hope those non-believers know we are just as much sinners as they are. The only difference is we have Christ in our life, and that's something that, like I said, without Jesus, I'm not sure what we would do. So, I just want them to know, listen, it's okay, where they're at right now, but I hope they hear the part that, with Christ, look out, sky's the limit. You can get through anything.
No doubt, Coach. I love that. That's a great word. And Christ is, for those that are listening that are non-believers, he is a doctor for the sinners, right? And Jesus says himself that
and we're all sinners.
No doubt that he came for those that are lost, for those that are sick, which is all of us. So if you can recognize that and come to Christ, he will cleanse you by his finished work on the cross, and give you new life in a relationship with him. So, Coach Potter, I just want to say thanks. Obviously, your story is so powerful, and what you're doing through D2 Up is encouraging to myself and for those that you have shared with. So thanks for joining us today, and having a passion for mental health in this day and age is important, and just wishing you well as you continue this journey.
Absolutely appreciate you, Noah, and your humbleness and the way you go about your business. So being an old dude like I am now, it's fun for me to watch young people like you go about your business the way you do. So I appreciate you, and I love what you guys do, in your work.
Thanks,
So,
Coach.
hey, it's time to get to Minnesota. That's all I can say.
Yes, sir. It's awesome, Coach. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
If you want to get involved with Uncommon Sports Group and the mission that we are on to help you navigate the sport industry as followers of Christ, apply for our academy on our website at uncommonSG.org. That's uncommonSG.org. Be sure to catch new episodes of the Uncommon Podcast every other week on Thursdays at midnight Eastern Time. Until next time, we pray that you will strive to be uncommon by glorifying the name of God in whatever you may do. See you next time.